How we doing, coin traders? Thanks for joining me for the show. Looking at Celestia TIA on that ticker. Had a pretty good day for altcoins while Bitcoin was pulling back about 6% here. So actually kind of nice to see, especially when we talk about dominance for altcoins. So the fact that we do have Bitcoin pulling back and altcoins starting to have a little bit more of that rally is kind of one of the signs that we want to see, and kind of one of the best case scenarios and setups, especially since Bitcoin's a little bit more on longer term consolidation here on some of the longer time frames. And altcoins definitely are in need of an oversold bounce and rally, which hopefully we're going to start to see play out right now. Now, as you can see, we have been in a downtrend on Celestia ever since the middle of February. So for about 4 months here, just pulling back, setting lower highs and lower lows. A little bit of a fake out here, and obviously a time where we actually thought we were going to get a little bit more upside momentum. But the fact that we actually lost a lot of the support right after we did actually rally, break these exponential moving averages, and backtest to 50 as support. Couldn't get over this very big resistance point, though, right below the $12 psychological resistance point. And as you can see, looking left, just over that $12 psychological mark, too. So definitely going to be a big resistance point moving forward. But yeah, so obviously big pullback and not necessarily much bullish upside from there. In fact, if we actually go down and look at volume, you can see just mostly dwarfed by bearish volume here, with only a slight handful of bullish volume. But the good news is that we've actually seen the largest amount of bullish volume come in for Celestia that we have seen here since the end of May. So for about the last month, the largest amount of bull volume. So coming in at 1.449 million here on the daily close. And especially since we are looking at a very nice candle here closing for Celestia. So looking at a little bit more of it. And one of the great things about it is that we actually set a new lower low in terms of price compared to the previous low, which came in at 6.05. So now the new low was set at 5.723. But the fact that we actually bounced off a new lower low and set this much nice upside with this nice of a bullish candle, completely erasing all of these days, 5 days worth of bearish pullback and momentum here over the downside. So right now, what we're still seeing, especially being about 4 hours into the current daily candle, is a little bit more of that follow through, and obviously up overhead do have a little bit more of that resistance point coming in, especially looking up at the 12 exponential moving average first, which does come in at 7.028. Now, based on previous levels of closing resistance that we did just surpass on this nice bullish candle here, we're actually looking at a very big support point coming in at 6.528. So looking left, big point of resistance, not only on the close, but price level rejection as well on all of these 5 candles. So the daily candle that just closed, very nice bullish body, especially with a long lower shadow, signaling a lot of upside pressure and a lot of buying once we did hit our low. And especially now with the second day of follow through, which is exactly what we want to see. But still plenty of potential to see a little bit more of those resistance points coming in. And specifically, we're going to be looking at an upside resistance point for the close coming in at 7.634. And if we do anticipate where that actually would align with this 26 period EMA, for example, probably get a pretty nice matchup between the 26 period exponential moving average resistance, as well as this previous level of support before the flush, being that big point of upside resistance as well. So 7.634 is going to be our upside target here before we actually look to make a pullback and retracement. But that's just based off of the daily time frame right now. And one of the things I do want to do now is actually talk about VPVR, volume profile visible range. And most notably, just because if we actually, for example, mirror over and look at the daily price trading range over and intersect it with the mass on the right here, you can just see how far down we actually extended into this mass point and how it was this very nice support as we did see prices pull back. And then now looking at a little bit more upside. So looking on that side, not much mass trading. So we actually should see a little bit more ease of movement all the way up to that resistance point. But based on previous price trading, not necessarily that much. So I would expect that if any sort of bullish volume and momentum comes in for crypto and for Celestia, that we'll likely blow through it and start to get stuck up on this upper level of resistance for mass, which probably is going to come in around the 880, just shy of the $9 mark. And that's what we'd be looking at for our big points of resistance here. But so just to highlight kind of what we talk about on the channel a lot is that how looking left over here on this big period of sideways movement, we did have a lot of price trading in this range. And that's why we do like sitting sideways and establishing ranges just like this, because it does establish a heart line typically. And that's where we do end up seeing a lot of the point of masses which do allow prices to come back, retrace, and then find those as support before hopefully finding the next leg of upside movement. Now, obviously, on the current chart right now, we did completely blow through the previous level of support for the VPVR, and that's why we do think that we're going to likely get stuck in this overall zone, at least for a period of time anyway. And just like on the way down, or excuse me, just like on the way up, we like to see sideways consolidation. That's also the same as on the way down. So didn't necessarily see that, so not necessarily impossible to think that we could actually blow through that level to see the next price level resistance coming in right at the $11 to $12 zone here. But realistically, if we actually do start to see a little bit more upside rally and some resistances at that level, again, just below the $10 psychological, what we would love to see is a changing and redirection of these exponential moving averages, just like we thought we were going to see previously with Celestia, except now hopefully this time we can see a little bit more follow through continuation and having that be on our way once again, because we do know that we are going to be looking up at another upside level of resistance. And it's pretty much more of a zone coming in right about 8 and 15, 8.15. And so looking left, big point of resistance, obviously, or excuse me, support, and then obviously support on this dip before forming kind of more or less the short-term double bottom and getting stuck up at that resistance point before flushing. And now obviously on that bounce, big point of resistance as well, which did come in right at the 12-period EMA. So again, all of this to highlight just that even if we have seen our bottom already and we're looking at a little bit more upside momentum, we are going to be expecting to see an upside target from about the $8 to $9 zone as being a big point of resistance, likely not necessarily seeing that much of price action above that unless we do get a huge influx of bullish volume, kind of like what we have had, and we'd love to see increasing bullish volume as well. And obviously the rest of the crypto space does have a huge impact on the overall price movement, especially for altcoins here. So if we do want to talk about potential upside from current price levels at 6.9 up to the $8 level would be a gain of about 15% here, all the way up to an upside potential move of the $9 level would put us up about a 30% gain from current prices. So still plenty of potential for some nice upside, especially based off realistic targets for where we're at. If we do want to look up towards the previous level of resistance at about 1180, all the way up to the $12 psychological level, then we would be looking at a potential price gain of about 72 all the way up to 75%. So plenty of still upside movement and opportunities, especially when we talk about how overextended we have seen Celestia. And for example, from the top down to the low today, almost 73% of a pullback in, like we talked about 4 months here. Now, do want to flip over into the 2-day chart here because I have a very clear level and zone of big major previous support and also current resistance now. So we are going to be looking at coming in about 885 on the upper end down to about 812, 820 on the lower end. So as we can see, big points of previous support and resistance. So looking all the way left, this was a big point of support that we actually found on the pullback, big period of bouncing, found a lot of support. And then on the pullback for the second test and effective double bottom here off this 880 level, this was a very big point of longer term closing support here before finally flushing it and turning it into big period of closing resistance. So again, turning on VPVR volume profile visible range for this 2-day chart, you can see just how it does interact. So support on the low end, but then obviously on the way up, like we talked about, first it will start at the lower end coming in right at about 820, and then it will get progressively more resistive if we do enter the upper end, which is about 880 or so. And then obviously center point of mass is going to be coming in a lot higher than that, pretty much right below the $10 psychological mark. And as we can see, big periods of support and resistance as well on this overall chart. So, which is what to be expected, which is exactly why we call it such a big psychological level. And other than that, we're actually looking pretty good once that level does pop, because when that does happen, we'll also have the trend changing and also looking at these exponential moving averages to hopefully actually flip us bullish as well on this 2-day chart as well. Now, one of the things about the setup right now is that if we talk about volume that has come in for this 2-day chart for Celestia, we can see our capitulation candle coming in with the most amount of volume that we've actually seen since the initial dump on Celestia back in the middle of April. So for over 2 months, we've actually seen the highest amount of bearish volume here. And then ever since then, little candles, very small bodies on those candles, and then additionally, huge amount of tapering off, or a significant amount rather of tapering off bearish volume on tiny candles like that. So effectively a very nice bottoming signal coming in, especially after confirming closing support right around 630 here. So that does leave us with plenty of room and opportunity to actually see over the next 2 days a very nice increase in bullish volume, hopefully, especially as we do run up to test that resistance level and zone right from about 820 all the way up to about 880. Now, pulling up technical indicators and oscillators for this 2-day chart, one big concept that I do want to actually talk about, and that is divergence here. So specifically on this way up, you can see higher highs maintaining that trend. But also, if we look at the 2-day RSI, or the relative strength index, like we're looking at now, we are seeing lower highs on the peaks for this, as we do see also the RSI for this overall trend heading to the downside. Yet, meanwhile, price is still heading to the upside. So we call that bullish divergence. And typically when we do see that, it does signal the slowing of a trend. And it works the opposite, just like it does on the way up. As on the way down, bearish divergence does lead to a little bit more of that upside move and a potential slowing of the trend. And obviously, with the more points that you do have, the more significance and reliance that you can actually put on this type of pattern. And especially once you do get your confirmation, that's kind of where the ultimate trend does start to change. And you can use this as a very nice guide on the downside move. So like we said, similarly to on the way up as well as RSI heading down, we can also look at it in the other light of price heading down, but RSI actually starting to head up. So on the longer term here, we actually found our RSI bottoming out almost right around the 30 line here at about 30.09. So right on that 30 line, pretty much signaling oversold conditions on this 2-day chart. But then now we're actually looking at another higher low. And for the low, we actually got to 31.79. So yet, meanwhile, are looking at lower lows, not only in price, but also for the close as well, which is what the RSI is actually based on. So we're actually using this as a pretty nice guide too for a little bit more of that bearish divergence here coming in, which actually does signal a little bit more potential for some upside pressure. Now, next thing that I want to look at too is the stochastic RSI, so the relative strength index for the stochastic oscillator. And so right now we're well below the 20 line here, looking like a very nice bullish cross is about to play out and see a little bit more upside direction. And if we look left, the last time we actually had this set up was back the middle of April on this bounce where we found our first low. And pretty much from there, we were looking at a pretty big price increase. So the low of the move all the way up to pretty much the trend high is about a 62% increase. So even if we don't see anything that is perfect and a reversal, for example, we still could be looking at a potential if we do get something similar, which would put us all the way right up to that resistance point, pretty much right around 880, and actually slightly above that, just into the $9 mark as well. Now, looking at the weekly chart here, do want to pull up a Fibonacci retracement. So from the low right after the launch at the end of last year, all the way up to the current all-time high right now, did have a pullback pretty much right to the 78.6 mark. As we can see, weekly close just shy of that, but on the current week, we're actually starting to rally well above that. And so price for the 78.6 is 6.251. So as long as we do hold that, that's still an acceptable pullback for crypto as a longer term hold. Because essentially what this does mean in most instances is that we're not necessarily looking to make a new all-time high right away. In fact, we're actually thinking the most likely pattern at this point, especially after pulling back to this level of retracement, is typically working on changing the trend in the longer term. Now, for example, if we had actually only pulled back to about the 38.2, which is right at 13.9, we could have very much had an easy path to a new all-time high. But because we're actually not seeing that, and the retracement has been so significant, it will take a lot longer now to actually start to reverse this trend before actually looking to make longer-term all-time highs here on this weekly chart. Now, do want to shift down and look at some shorter time frames. Right now, we are on the 4-hour candle time frames, and essentially a pretty nice looking pattern right now because we have fully crossed on top of these exponential moving averages, printing that candle and that close, showing that follow through, especially with some decent volume as well coming in. And the other nice thing about this current setup is that we're actually looking at a very nice bullish cross here on the 12 over the 26. So a good sign, especially if we do zoom out on this overall consolidation type pattern, looking at big resistances coming in between these. So to actually confirm that resistance, confirm a very nice breakout, and then finally breaking on top of the 50-period EMA, which looking left was a big point of resistance as well. Hugely good signs right now. So as long as we can maintain that on that trend, And the other thing is that we actually haven't seen this much consecutive candle over candle of bullish volume coming in since we actually had our initial move and our fake out, which actually we thought was going to be propelling and a little bit more sustaining. And we've actually seen a little bit more bullish volume coming in on the current in terms of a prolonged time frame compared to what we saw back then. So a little bit more opportunity to think that we could see a lot more higher highs out of this. And if we actually want to go ahead and look at some price levels, then what we're looking at is pretty much 822 all the way up to the effective closing resistance, forming this zone like we talked about. So previous level of resistance, like we mentioned, in between the resistance zone from the 26 to the 50, looking left as well, big points of support and resistance to confirm this level. Up overhead on top of that, confirmed as well, especially in between the 12 and 26, is the 8.81 level. Looking left, big point of support as well. So plenty of reasons why these levels are going to be significant. So up overhead, 820 to 880 is going to be the levels that we're actually looking out for right now based off of previous trading history. It's like we talked about a 20% gain from current prices all the way up to potentially about a 27. So anything could happen in between there. What we'd really love to see is a confirmation and directional change of these exponential moving averages, and then being able to follow the EMAs to the upside and then potentially get stuck up on this resistance level. But we would still love to see shorter term EMAs hold, eventually blowing through that with some nice bullish volume here on the bottom. Now looking at the 12-hour chart here really quick before we go ahead and wrap up, just to talk about one of the overhead resistance levels that is likely to come in before 820, and that is going to be the 762 mark. So previous level of support, closing support, as well as resistance here, and then also support on this initial move. So plenty of opportunity to see upside resistances smash, but with this 12-hour chart and this resistance point as well, also going to have the exponential for the 50-period EMA on this 12 to come down. So likely in this instance, what I'm thinking is probably a run-up to about the 760 level, and then probably retracing, setting that higher low before finding the next opportunity to actually break that level. That would be an extremely strong setup and scenario for the bulls here on the Celestia chart based on some of the shorter time frames. So from current prices, that would be about a 10% move to the upside that we're looking at. So potential 10% to the upside before retracing. And like we talked about, huge resistances confirmed basically on these overall exponential moving averages. So just to be able to break this 12 period, now we are going to be looking also up overhead at the 26. So that is going to be a very big resistive zone as well, probably starting down in the 7.25 all the way up to about the 762 level like we talked about. Do have to keep a very close eye here on the rest of the crypto space though, and as long as we see the Bitcoin dominance trending down, we do know that alts are going to be a little bit more favoritism in that spotlight. And especially with the amount of pullbacks and retracements like we have seen for a lot of cryptos like Celestia, we know that the opportunity for a bounce and a move to the upside is going to be pretty significant. And like we talked about a over 70% pullback here from the current all-time high. So plenty of opportunity for that bounce, giving a lot of those gains back. So yeah, obviously no one can ever be certain of a bottom, but with a lot of the signs that we have been seeing, those are certainly bottom signs that we do look out for, and it would be very nice to see a bottom and a bounce being played out right now, at least an oversold bounce playing out to those resistance levels up overhead. But ideally we would see a trend change and a little bit more longer term stability and price action to the upside out of Celestia and the rest of the crypto space here. But so yeah, with that is going to go ahead and wrap up the show for today. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe button if you have not done so just yet. And as always, don't forget to post any questions, comments, issues, disagreements, all that stuff down in the comments section. Still love getting back to each and every one of you. Or feel free to reach out over on Twitter or X at coin_trades is the handle over there. Well, that is going to do it for now though. So stay safe, take care. Appreciate all the continuous love and support as always, and I will catch you back in the next video.